The moment I understood I was no longer part of my own family came at my cousin's wedding, standing near the back of a rented barn in upstate New York, holding a glass of champagne I never asked for. My mother leaned in, smiling for photos, and said quietly, almost kindly, "Let your brother speak for the family. It's complicated." That sentence lasted 3 seconds. The consequences lasted the rest of my life. My name is Lauren Whitfield. I was 32 years old that summer, old enough to know when something had shifted, but young enough to still believe it might shift back if I stayed calm, reasonable, quiet. I didn't argue. I nodded. I stepped back. That's what I had always done. The wedding itself was beautiful, in the way expensive things usually are when no one wants to look too closely. White linen chairs, soft string lights, a ceremony full of words like unity and forever, spoken by people who had never once asked me how I was doing. My older brother, Mark Whitfield, stood front and center, laughing easily, shaking hands, introducing himself as if he were already the head of the family, which, I realized later, he already was. During the reception, my aunt clinked her glass and asked Mark to say a few words on behalf of the Whitfields. Not me, not both of us, just him. "Lauren's here too," someone joked from a table near the bar. My father chuckled politely and said, "Oh, she doesn't like speaking." I did like speaking. I just learned early that speaking came with consequences. I stood there, listening to Mark talk about legacy, about our grandfather's company, about how proud he was to carry the Whitfield name forward. People nodded. They clapped. Someone whispered that Mark reminded them so much of Dad. No one looked at me. That was the first crack. Small, easy to ignore, perfectly deniable. Later that night, while guests danced and my mother adjusted the train of her dress for the 3rd time, I asked her what she meant earlier. "Complicated how?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. She frowned slightly, like I'd asked the wrong question. "You know, the business, the estate. It's easier if Mark handles things." "I work in corporate compliance," I said. "I understand complex systems." She smiled again, tight this time. "That's different." That word followed me home. Different. I lived 3 hours away in Boston, worked for a mid-size pharmaceutical company, paid my own mortgage, my own taxes, my own insurance. I was financially independent, legally literate, emotionally careful. But within my family, I was still different. Over the next few months, the exclusions became more precise. A Thanksgiving dinner where seating just worked out, so I was at the kids' table. A birthday forgotten until my sister-in-law texted me a cake emoji at 10 p.m. A holiday email about the family trust that didn't include me, forwarded accidentally by my cousin. I noticed everything. I said nothing. I told myself it was temporary, that my parents were overwhelmed, that Mark had kids now, that things were shifting naturally. Then my grandmother died. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield. She'd lived to 91, sharp as glass until the end. She never raised her voice. She never explained herself. She just watched people carefully and remembered what they showed her. I loved her deeply, quietly, from a distance that grew wider every year. The funeral was small, controlled, private. Mark sat with my parents in the front row. I sat behind them, alone. After the service, people gathered in the church hall, murmuring, sharing stories. I stood near the back, listening to someone talk about the house. "The lake place will stay in the family," a family friend said. That's what Eleanor wanted. I felt a flicker of warmth. The lake house mattered to me. I spent summers there with her, learning how to read tide charts, how to keep records, how to notice patterns. Later that day, Mark pulled me aside. "We're meeting with the attorney next week," he said. "Just a heads up." "Am I included?" I asked. He hesitated. Just a beat too long. "I'll let you know," he said. "Things are still being sorted." That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment I'd ever assumed meant inclusion. Every silence I'd mistaken for peace. Every time I stepped back because someone told me it would be easier. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. I searched the county records. Eleanor Whitfield was meticulous. Deeds, filings, amendments, trust transfers. And there it was. A property transfer filed 6 months earlier. The lake house. transferred not to the family trust, not to my parents, but into a revocable holding entity, one with my name listed as the sole managing member. I stared at the screen. I hadn't been told. I hadn't been asked. I had been assigned. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't neglect. It was design. And whatever came next would not be an argument. It would be a decision. I didn't tell anyone what I found. Not Mark. Not my parents. Not even my closest friend. I needed time to understand what my grandmother had done before anyone tried to explain it away. The holding entity was called North Shore Ledger LLC. Clean, boring, purposefully unremarkable. Registered in New York, not Massachusetts. The managing member was listed as me, Lauren Whitfield. No middle initial, no ambiguity. I read the filing 3 times. It wasn't a mistake. Eleanor had transferred the lake house out of the family trust entirely. Quietly, legally. Months before she died, I closed my laptop and sat there, hands folded in my lap, heart steady in a way that surprised me. I wasn't excited. I was alert. Because nothing in my family ever happened without intention, and my grandmother had never made a move without anticipating resistance. The next week, Mark didn't call. Instead, my mother did. "Your brother mentioned you might have questions about the estate," she said lightly, as if we were discussing a seating chart. "Did he?" I replied. "Yes, there are some complexities. The attorney will walk us through everything." "Will I be there?" I asked. Another pause. Another recalculation. "Well," she said, "it's mostly administrative. Mark will represent the family." I stared out my kitchen window at the bare branches outside. "I am the family," I said. She sighed. "Lauren, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." That sentence landed. I realized something in that moment. They didn't see me as an obstacle yet. They saw me as noise, a complication that could be managed if ignored long enough. "Send me the meeting details," I said calmly. "I don't think that's necessary," she replied quickly. "We don't want to overwhelm you." I almost laughed. "I'll attend," I said. "Or I'll request the documents independently." Silence. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll text you." She hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, I sat in a polished conference room, overlooking a river I didn't recognize. My parents sat together on one side of the table. Mark sat at the head. The attorney, Richard Haynes, sat across from us, hands folded neatly. No one offered me a seat. I pulled out a chair myself. Richard smiled politely. "Lauren, nice to finally meet you." I returned the smile. Likewise. He launched into a rehearsed overview. Trust allocations, personal effects, cash accounts, investments. The lake house didn't come up. I waited. At minute 47, I spoke. "Before we conclude," I said evenly, "I'd like clarification on North Shore Ledger LLC." The room shifted. Mark's head snapped toward me. My father stiffened. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Richard blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The lake property," I continued. "Transferred earlier this year. Managed by that entity." Richard glanced down at his notes, then back up. "Yes, that was a separate arrangement." "Separate from what?" I asked. "From the family trust," he said carefully. "And who manages it?" I asked. He hesitated. Mark jumped in. "Lauren, this isn't the time." "I believe it is," I said, still calm. Richard cleared his throat. "According to the filing, you do." The silence was absolute. My mother's eyes flicked to Mark. My father's jaw tightened. "That can't be right," Mark said sharply. "That property belongs to all of us." "It belonged to Eleanor," I said, "and she reassigned it." My father leaned forward. "Why would she do that without telling us?" I met his gaze. "Maybe she did." No one answered that. Richard shuffled papers. "Eleanor requested confidentiality regarding this asset. She was specific." Mark laughed once, harshly. "So what? You just get it?" "I manage it," I said. "There's a difference." He stared at me. "You're not selling it out from under us." "I haven't decided anything," I replied. "I'm still reviewing the structure." My mother spoke then, voice tight. "This feels unfair." I looked at her. "Unfair how? You live far away. You're not involved," she said. "Mark takes the kids there. He maintains it." "I paid for the roof repairs 3 years ago," I said quietly. That stopped her. "I handled the insurance when the policy lapsed," I continued. I managed the rental permits when the town changed regulations. I've been involved, just not visible. Mark stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She manipulated you. No, I said. She trusted me. Richard raised a hand. Perhaps we should pause. Emotions are high. I stood as well. I'll have my own counsel review the documents. Until then, nothing changes. My father scoffed. You're making this adversarial. No, I said. I'm making it accurate. I left without waiting for a response. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from Mark. Missed calls from my mother. A voicemail from my father accusing me of betrayal. I didn't answer. Instead, I called a lawyer. Her name was Dana Morales. She specialized in estate law and corporate structures. Her voice was calm, precise, uninterested in family drama. Your grandmother was smart, she said after reviewing the filings. This is clean. What happens next? I asked. That depends, she replied. Do you want to be included, or do you want control? I stared at the dark ceiling. I want autonomy, I said. There was a pause. Then prepare to be misunderstood, Dana replied. I slept that night, knowing something fundamental had shifted. Not because I had power, but because I finally knew where I stood. And they did too. By Monday morning, the story had already been rewritten without me. I knew because my cousin texted asking why I was trying to take the lake house from Mark's kids. An old college friend messaged to say she hoped everything was okay after what she heard. Even my neighbor asked, gently, if my family situation was stressful lately. I hadn't spoken publicly. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't raised my voice. But the narrative was moving. That was when I understood the second rule of my family. Silence would always be filled, and never in my favor. Dana called me that afternoon. They've retained counsel, she said. Your brother, specifically. So it begins, I replied. Yes, she said. And I want you to hear this clearly. They're not confused. They're threatened. I closed my office door and sat down. What's their angle? They're going to argue intent, Dana said. That Eleanor was influenced. That the transfer was provisional. That the property is functionally communal. And the facts? I asked. The facts are solid, she replied. But facts don't stop people from trying. 2 days later, Mark showed up at my house, unannounced. I saw his car through the front window and felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, recognition. This was escalation. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. You didn't return my calls, he said, irritation thinly masked as concern. I didn't need to, I replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're tearing the family apart. I tilted my head. You mean I'm no longer holding it together for you? He frowned. You always do this. You disappear when things get uncomfortable. I disappear when I'm being managed, I said. He scoffed. Managed? You're acting like a victim. No, I replied evenly. I'm acting like an owner. That landed. His eyes flicked past me into the house, as if searching for proof of something. Wealth, leverage, weakness. You don't even use the place, he said. The kids love it. Dad built that dock. Grandma paid for it, I said, and she put my name on the deed. You don't get to rewrite history, he snapped. I'm not, I said. I'm reading it. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. You think this makes you powerful, he said. But you're isolating yourself. I looked at him for a long moment. You've mistaken isolation for independence, I said. They're not the same. He laughed, sharp and humorless. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But it will be my regret. He stared at me, then turned and walked back to his car. I closed the door gently. That night, my mother sent an email. Not a message. An email. Long. Emotional. Carefully structured to sound reasonable while saying nothing directly. She wrote about grief, about stress, about how families should pull together, about how Eleanor wouldn't want conflict. She ended with a sentence that made my stomach drop. What concerned about your state of mind? There it was. Not disagreement. Delegitimization. I forwarded the email to Dana without comment. She replied within minutes. They're laying groundwork, she wrote. Stay calm. Document everything. A week later, the formal letter arrived. Mark was petitioning the court to review the transfer under claims of undue influence. My name appeared in bold on the first page. I read it once. Then again. There was no rage, no panic, just clarity. They were no longer pretending. I called Dana. "We respond," she said, "but we do not over-explain." "I don't want to fight," I said. "You're not fighting," she replied. "You're standing still while they run into the truth." I gathered my records. Every invoice, every email, every payment I'd made quietly over the years. The maintenance logs, the rental agreements, the correspondence between me and my grandmother that showed consistency, not coercion. There was a pattern, and it wasn't manipulation, it was trust. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Plenty of time for rumors, plenty of time for pressure. My father called 2 days before Thanksgiving. "I don't recognize you," he said without greeting. "That's because you never looked closely," I replied. He sighed heavily. "You're hurting your mother." "I'm responding to her choices," I said. "This doesn't have to go to court," he insisted. "Just sign it back into the trust. We'll make it right." "After how many years?" I asked. Silence. "I won't be bullied into generosity," I said. "That's not generosity." "You're choosing property over family," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself." He hung up. Thanksgiving came and went, without an invitation. I ate dinner alone, the quiet thick but not painful. For the first time, the absence felt honest. As December approached, Dana called with an update. "They've requested mediation," she said. "Why?" I asked. "Because Discovery isn't going the way they expected," she replied. I looked out the window at the early snow settling on the street. "Good," I said. "Lauren," Dana added, "whatever happens next, they won't see you the same way again." I smiled slightly. "They never did," I said. Mediation was scheduled for the second week of December, in a beige office park halfway between my home and my parents'. Neutral ground, they called it. A place designed to make everyone feel equally uncomfortable. I arrived early. That wasn't strategy. That was habit. I sat in my car for a moment before going in, watching people walk past with coffee cups and phones pressed to their ears, living lives untouched by whatever word they were about to use to describe me. Difficult, cold, ungrateful. Dana met me in the lobby. She wore the same calm expression she always did, the one that suggested she had already seen worse versions of this story play out and knew how it usually ended. "They're here," she said. "All of them." "Of course they are," I replied. Inside the conference room, my parents sat on one side of the table. Mark sat beside them, arms crossed, jaw tight. His wife Claire sat slightly behind him, eyes flicking between us like she was keeping score. The mediator, a man named Paul Hendricks, stood and smiled as we entered. He spoke softly, deliberately, like someone trying not to startle animals. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "The goal today is understanding, not blame." I took my seat across from them. Understanding had never been their goal. Paul asked everyone to speak briefly about what they hoped to achieve. My father went first. "We want our family back," he said, voice steady but strained. "We don't want lawyers tearing us apart." My mother nodded, eyes already glossy. "We want fairness." Mark leaned forward. "We want to protect what belongs to all of us." Claire didn't speak. Paul turned to me. I kept my hands folded in front of me. "I want accuracy," I said, "and autonomy." The word autonomy seemed to hang in the air longer than the others. Paul nodded. "Okay, let's talk about the property." Mark jumped in immediately. "The lake house has always been communal. My kids grew up there. Dad built half of it. It's not something one person should control." Dana raised a finger slightly. "Control and ownership are different concepts." Mark glared at her. "You're missing the point." "No," Dana replied calmly. "You are," Paul interjected. "Let's keep this constructive." I finally spoke again. "I didn't ask for this structure," I said. "I didn't design it. Eleanor did. I'm responding to her decision, not creating a new one." My mother shook her head. "She wouldn't have done this if she were thinking clearly." I met her eyes. She was thinking clearly enough to anticipate this conversation. That landed harder than I expected. Mark laughed bitterly. "So this is about punishment?" "No," I said. "This is about boundaries." "You've always been dramatic," he snapped. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The impatience. The certainty that he should be deferred to. "I've been observant," I said. "There's a difference." Paul suggested a break. When we reconvened, Mark slid a document across the table toward me. "We're offering a compromise," he said. "You keep a minority interest. The rest goes back into the trust." I didn't touch it. "What happens to management?" I asked. He hesitated. The trust would handle that. Meaning you, I said. He bristled. Meaning the family. I leaned back. No. Claire finally spoke. Lauren, please. This is tearing Mark apart. I looked at her. This isn't happening to him. It's happening because of him. Her mouth opened, then closed. Paul cleared his throat. Lauren, is there any version of this where you're willing to adjust the structure? Yes, I said. Everyone leaned in. When I'm no longer being pressured to justify my existence, I continued. When decisions aren't framed as emergencies to force compliance. When my role isn't minimized to make others comfortable. Silence. My father rubbed his temples. You're punishing us. I shook my head. I stopped rescuing you. That ended mediation. No agreement, no handshake. Just quiet paperwork and strained goodbyes. As I stood to leave, my mother reached for my arm. Don't do this, she whispered. You'll regret it. I gently removed her hand. I already regretted not doing it sooner, I said. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. I breathed deeply, feeling something unfamiliar. Relief. 2 days later, Dana called. They've escalated, she said. They're requesting expedited discovery. What does that mean? I asked. They're looking for something, she replied. Anything to shift leverage. Will they find it? I asked. No, she said, but they'll try. That night, I received a text from my cousin again. Heard you're refusing to share. Grandma would be disappointed. I stared at the screen. Then I blocked the number. The next week, my employer called me into HR, not because of performance, because my brother had emailed my supervisor, suggesting that my ongoing legal dispute might affect my judgment. I sat there, stunned, listening as the HR director explained they were required to document the conversation. I nodded. I thanked them. I left. In my car, my hands shook for the first time since this began. That was the line. Not property, not money, my livelihood. I called Dana immediately. This changes things, she said. How? I asked. Because now it's no longer a family disagreement, she replied. It's interference. I stared out at the parking lot, watching people move between cars, unaware. What do we do? I asked. Dana paused. We stop reacting, she said, and we start acting. Dana didn't raise her voice when she said it. That was how I knew it mattered. We document interference, she told me, and then we change posture. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, HR's email still glowing on the screen. Neutral language, corporate phrasing, no accusations. Just a record that my brother had crossed a professional boundary. I don't want to escalate, I said. You didn't, Dana replied. He did. She had me forward everything. The email Mark sent to my supervisor. The follow-up from HR. My response, which had been brief and factual. I have no conflict that affects my role. I have not disclosed internal matters to any party. I am compliant with all company policies. Dana read it. Good, she said. You didn't defend yourself. You stated facts. That evening, she sent a formal notice to Mark's attorney. Cease and desist. Limited scope. Specific language. Any further attempts to interfere with Ms. Whitfield's employment or professional reputation will be treated as tortious interference. I read the draft twice before approving it. It felt heavy, final, but it also felt clean. The response came faster than I expected. Mark called. I let it ring. Then he texted, You really want to go this route? I didn't reply. Then my father called. I answered this time. What have you done? He asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I protected my job, I said. You embarrassed us, he snapped. Dragging work into this is low. He dragged work into it, I replied. I responded. You're acting like an enemy, he said. I closed my eyes. I'm acting like someone with limits. He scoffed. This isn't you. I thought about that. This is the version of me you didn't need, I said. That's why it feels unfamiliar. He hung up. The next few weeks were quieter. No calls, no texts, no new filings. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a held breath. Dana warned me that this phase often came before a pivot. They regroup, she said. They test different pressure points. She was right. The next move came through my mother. She sent a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text. Ink on paper. Careful script. Lauren, I don't know how we got here. I lie awake at night wondering where I went wrong. I raised you to value family, and now I don't recognize the choices you're making. You've always been strong, but strength without softness becomes something else. I hope you remember who you are." I read it twice. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just reframing. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer with the others. That weekend, I drove to the lake house alone. I hadn't been there since the funeral. The drive felt longer than I remembered, the road narrower, the trees heavier with snow. When I unlocked the door, the smell hit me first. Wood, cold water, time. I walked through the rooms slowly. The living room, where Mark's kids had scattered toys without ever picking them up. The kitchen, where my mother used to criticize how I loaded the dishwasher. The small desk near the window, where my grandmother kept her ledgers. I opened the drawer. They were still there. Notebooks, dates, notes in the margins, small observations. Mark forgot to lock up again. Lauren fixed the permit issue without fuss. Trust is quiet. I sat down and let the silence settle. This place wasn't just property, it was evidence. I took photos, not of memories, of records, receipts, maintenance logs, notes referencing conversations I remembered having with her. Conversations no one else knew about because they didn't ask. That night, I slept there. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest. On Monday, Dana called with an update. "They're shifting strategy," she said. "Less emotional, more financial." "What does that mean?" I asked. "They're claiming your management of the property has reduced its value," she replied. "They want an accounting." I almost smiled. "Give it to them," I said. Dana paused. "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. "I've been keeping one for years." She laughed softly. "Of course you have." 2 days later, we submitted the accounting. Every dollar, every repair, every improvement, every expense I covered personally when the trust dragged its feet. The numbers were clear. The property hadn't lost value. It had been stabilized. The response from their side was immediate. An amended filing, new language, sharper tone. They were accusing me now of overstepping, of acting unilaterally, of freezing them out. Dana forwarded it with one line. "They're panicking." I felt it too, because when people lose control, they confuse it with injustice. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing, 3 weeks out. This time, it wasn't about mediation. It was about authority. And for the first time, I wasn't walking in as the quiet daughter. I was walking in as the named managing member. That night, I opened my laptop and drafted a single document, a resolution. It outlined my authority under the LLC, my intent to formalize usage terms, my plan to convert the property to a limited-access family retreat with defined scheduling, liability waivers, and cost-sharing requirements. No favoritism, no assumptions, just structure. I didn't send it yet. I saved it, because timing matters. And they were about to learn that silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. The hearing was set for January, just after New Year's, when everyone pretends to be renewed while still dragging the weight of the year before. I arrived at the courthouse early again, not out of nerves, out of preference. Dana met me at security, coat draped neatly over her arm, expression unreadable. "They filed a supplemental brief last night," she said as we walked. "More emotion than law." "Of course it is," I replied. Inside the courtroom, the air was dry and still. My parents sat together in the second row. Mark sat beside them, tapping his foot like he was waiting for a flight, not a ruling that could rearrange his sense of entitlement. Claire wasn't there. That told me more than anything else. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The case was called quickly. No theatrics, just facts on the record. Mark's attorney spoke first. He framed the situation as a family dispute that had spiraled unnecessarily. He spoke about tradition, shared use, implied promises. He used the word unfair 3 times. He never said my name. When Dana stood, she didn't counter emotionally. She placed documents into evidence. The transfer filing, the operating agreement, the accounting records, the correspondence showing attempts at interference. Then she said one sentence that shifted the room. My client did not take control. Control was assigned to her. The judge looked up. "Assigned by whom?" she asked. "By the owner," Dana replied. "While she was alive, competent, and explicit. Mark leaned toward his attorney, whispering sharply. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "do you dispute the authenticity of these filings?" He hesitated, just long enough. "No," he said. "But that's all I needed," the judge replied. She reviewed the documents in silence for several minutes. No one spoke. I watched my mother clasp and unclasp her hands. My father stared straight ahead, jaw set. The judge finally looked up. "This court does not exist to resolve hurt feelings," she said evenly. "It exists to enforce lawful decisions." She denied their motion, not dismissed it, denied it. There would be no review of the transfer, no restructuring, no shared authority. The LLC stood. My role stood. As we gathered our things, my mother stood abruptly. "This isn't over," she said to no one in particular. Dana leaned toward me. "It is legally," she whispered. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a reset. Mark caught up to us on the steps. "You think you won," he said, voice low and tight. "I think the law did," I replied. He shook his head. "You always needed to be special." I looked at him. "You always needed me to be small." He turned away without another word. That should have been the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. It was the bank. Specifically, the bank that held the trust's remaining assets. "Ms. Whitfield," the woman said carefully, "we're calling regarding a line of credit tied to the family trust. There are discrepancies we need to clarify." My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Representations made about collateral usage," she said. "Specifically, the lake property." I closed my eyes. "They don't own that property," I said, "and they haven't for months." There was a pause. "Yes," she said, "that's why we're calling." Dana was on the phone within the hour. "They used the property as implied collateral," she said. "Not formally, but enough to concern the bank." "Is that allowed?" I asked. "Not if they don't control it," she replied. "The bank froze the line of credit pending review. The trust's liquidity vanished overnight." Mark called me 7 times that day. I didn't answer. My father left a voicemail. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "We're exposed now." I listened once, then deleted it. Because for the first time, the consequences were landing where they belonged. The next week was chaos. Vendors calling, advisors backing away, family friends suddenly unavailable. And through it all, silence from me. Dana advised against engagement. "Let the systems work," she said. "They're not used to systems that don't bend." Then came the email from the trustee. They were reviewing the trust's management practices independently, not because of me, because of the bank. That was the moment I understood the real shift. I wasn't the problem anymore. I was the variable they could no longer control. My mother showed up at my house that Sunday. She stood on the porch, coat buttoned wrong, eyes rimmed red. "I need to talk to you," she said. I didn't invite her in. "We've talked," I replied. She shook her head. "No, we've argued. This is different." I waited. "They're blaming you," she said quietly. "Mark says you set this up." I met her gaze. I told the truth. She looked down. "Your father's scared." "So was I," I said. "For years." She reached out, then stopped herself. "You could fix this," she whispered. I exhaled slowly. "I didn't break it," I said. "And I won't lie to save it." Tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "You've changed," she said. "Yes," I replied. I stopped negotiating my place. She left without another word. That night, I finalized the resolution I drafted days earlier. I signed it. Effective immediately, the lake property would be governed by written access rules. No implied rights, no assumptions, no emergencies. I sent it to Dana. She forwarded it to the Trust's council. The response was swift. Outrage, accusations, threats of social fallout, but none of it mattered because the authority was clear. And once authority is documented, emotion becomes noise. As January turned colder, I felt something unfamiliar settle in. Not triumph, stability. And that scared them more than any argument ever could. Stability changes how people talk to you. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with applause. It just removes urgency. And when urgency disappears, so do most manipulations. For the first time since my grandmother died, no one from my family contacted me for an entire week. No calls, no emails, no indirect messages through cousins or friends. The silence wasn't strategic. It was stunned. They had run out of leverage. Dana noticed it too. "This is the pause," she said during our weekly call. "They're recalculating." "What happens next?" I asked. "That depends on whether they accept reality or try to rewrite it again," she replied. I already knew the answer. The rewrite came quietly. A local paper ran a short human interest piece about my parents downsizing. It framed it as a graceful transition. New chapter. Simplifying life. Letting go of burdens. What it didn't mention was the frozen credit line, or the trustee review, or the fact that several family accounts had been quietly liquidated to cover short-term obligations. The article named Mark as helping manage the transition. He was still managing the story. I didn't respond. That weekend, I received an email from Claire. It was the first direct communication she'd ever sent me. "Lauren, I don't know if this will help, but I wanted you to know that some of this wasn't what it looked like from the inside. Mark didn't always tell the truth. Not to you, not to your parents, not to me." I read it twice. There was no apology, no request, just a statement. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, because clarity doesn't require engagement. 2 days later, the trustee formally notified my parents that the trust would be placed under temporary independent administration, pending review of asset representations. That was the moment everything shifted, from family conflict to institutional oversight. My father called me that night, not angry, not accusatory, tired. "They've taken control," he said quietly. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear. "Yes," I replied. "I built that trust to protect everyone," he said. "Now it feels like it's being taken away." "It was taken away when it stopped being honest," I said gently. He sighed. "I thought keeping things vague gave us flexibility." "It gave Mark flexibility," I replied. "The rest of us absorbed the risk." He didn't argue. "I should have listened to your grandmother," he said. I closed my eyes. "She didn't want to be listened to," I said. "She wanted her decisions followed." There was a long pause. "Do you hate us?" he asked. The question landed differently coming from him. "No," I said honestly. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of choices I didn't make." He exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to talk to you now." "You don't have to," I replied. "This isn't about comfort anymore." After we hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, finality. The trustees' review moved quickly, too quickly for anyone to spin. Emails surfaced. Representations contradicted filings. Casual language used in financial contexts where precision mattered. Mark's name appeared often. So did my father's, though less directly. Dana kept me informed, but I didn't need details. The pattern was clear. This wasn't malicious. It was careless control. By mid-February, the trustee issued preliminary findings. The trust had relied on assumptions about asset access that were no longer valid. Certain decisions had been made without full authority. Oversight was recommended. Mark was asked to step back from any fiduciary role, pending further review. He didn't take it well. He showed up at my office. Security called me before he reached the elevator. "There's a man here asking for you," the receptionist said. "He says he's your brother." I closed my eyes. "Send him up," I said. He paced the moment he entered, like a caged animal. "You're enjoying this," he said without greeting. I stayed seated. "No, you always wanted to embarrass me," he continued. "This was your chance." I looked at him calmly. "This wasn't about you," he laughed. "Everything's about me. You just finally admitted it." "No," I said. "This was about me." That stopped him. "You didn't need to destroy everything," he said. "I didn't," I replied. I stopped holding it together with silence. He stared at me, eyes wild. "You think you're better than us now?" I shook my head. "I think I'm done negotiating." He slammed his hand on my desk. "You're alone," he said. I stood then, slowly. "No," I said. "I'm independent." Security knocked gently on the door. Mark looked at them, then back at me. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for me," I replied. He was escorted out without another word. That night, I walked home instead of taking the subway. The air was cold, sharp, real. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for the next move, because there was no move left that involved me. The systems had taken over, and systems don't care about family roles. They care about truth. When the systems take over, people reveal who they are, without the cover of emotion. The trustee's interim report was released quietly on a Friday afternoon. No press, No announcements. Just emails sent to the parties involved, dense with language that sounded neutral, but carried weight. Findings, irregularities, recommendations. Dana called me 15 minutes after it went out. They're recommending permanent independent administration, she said, and removal of Mark from any future fiduciary position. I sat down at my desk. And my parents? I asked. They're not accused of intent, she replied, but they're being described as inattentive. That word landed harder than accusation. Inattentive meant they let it happen. Inattentive meant they looked away. What happens now? I asked. The court will likely adopt the recommendations, Dana said, which means the trust becomes boring. I smiled faintly. Boring sounds good. The fallout was immediate. Mark sent a group email to extended family, accusing me of engineering a takeover. He used words like ambush, manipulation, betrayal. He implied I had always resented him, that I'd waited for Eleanor to die. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Dana. Her reply was one sentence. Thank you. That email became Exhibit A in a pattern of behavior. My parents stopped speaking publicly. No more articles. No more quiet explanations to friends. They retreated. That, more than anything, told me the story they'd been telling themselves was finally collapsing under its own weight. Claire emailed again. This time, longer. She described Mark's temper, his refusal to accept responsibility, his insistence that everyone else had failed him. She didn't ask me to intervene. She just wanted me to know. I read it once and archived it. There was nothing to do with information that arrived after the moment for action had passed. That spring, I made a decision I'd been circling for months. I resigned from my job. Not because of pressure. Not because of fear. Because I didn't want to build someone else's compliance framework anymore. I wanted to build my own. I incorporated a consulting firm under my name. Nothing flashy, just clean governance, risk assessment, and operational clarity for small businesses that had grown too fast and lost control. Dana reviewed the paperwork before I filed. You're good at this, she said. Not just the legal side, the human side. I'm good at seeing where things break, I replied. She nodded. That's a skill people don't value until it's gone. The first client came through a former colleague. Then another. Then a referral. Work that didn't require me to perform gratitude. Work that rewarded precision. Meanwhile, the lake property settled into its new structure. Access requests came through email. Costs were shared transparently. Liability waivers were signed without drama. The chaos evaporated when assumptions were removed. One afternoon in early June, I received a message from the trustee. They wanted to formally close the review and asked if I had any final statements for the record. I thought about it overnight. Then I replied with 3 sentences. I acted within my authority. I disclosed all material facts. I declined to participate in misrepresentation. That was it. The court adopted the recommendations the following week. Mark was officially removed from any role related to the trust. The trust continued. Quietly. Properly. My parents were listed as beneficiaries only. No authority. No discretion. I found out through a third party. They didn't tell me. I didn't need them to. The last time I saw my mother was at a grocery store near her new condo. She looked startled, like she'd seen a ghost. We stood there between the produce and the dairy case, both holding baskets. You look well, she said. So do you, I replied. She hesitated. Your father misses you, I nodded. I'm sure. You don't call anymore, she said. No, I replied. She waited. I don't know how to be in your life now, she admitted. I met her eyes. Without control? I asked gently. She flinched. Yes, she said quietly. I don't either, I replied. That's why distance is safer. She swallowed. I wish things were different. So do I said. But wishing never changed how you treated me. She had no answer. We parted politely. No hug. No reconciliation. Just truth. That summer, I spent a week at the lake house, alone. No guests, no obligations. I sat on the dock in the mornings, coffee cooling beside me, water still and honest. I read my grandmother's old notebooks again. One entry stood out. People confuse peace with silence. Silence is just delay. I closed the book and looked out over the water. For most of my life, I delayed myself, called it loyalty, called it maturity. It wasn't. It was surrender, disguised as love. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me free. Freedom is quieter than people expect. It doesn't announce itself with relief or joy. It settles in slowly, like your body realizing it no longer needs to brace for impact. By late summer, my life had rearranged itself without asking permission from anyone else. My consulting firm was stable, not booming, not fragile, just steady. Clients came to me because something in their systems felt wrong, and they couldn't name it. I could. I worked reasonable hours. I slept deeply. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head. That was when the guilt tried to come back. It showed up the way it always had, disguised as concern. An email from an old family friend, a voicemail from a cousin I barely spoke to, a carefully worded message from my aunt. Your parents are struggling. This has been very hard on them. They don't understand why you won't just talk it through. Talk it through. As if words had ever been the problem. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded each message to Dana and archived them. She called after the third one. I know, I replied. Do you want to shut it down formally? She asked. I thought about it. No, I said. Silence is enough. 2 weeks, the call came from an unfamiliar number in Florida. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Lauren? A woman asked, her voice careful. Yes. This is Margaret Collins. I'm calling regarding Eleanor Whitfield's estate. I sat down. Yes, I said, again. I was Eleanor's personal accountant for several years, she continued. I retired recently, but I've been contacted by your brother's attorney. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed calm. About what? I asked. About whether Eleanor expressed regret regarding the transfer of the lake property, she said. And whether she intended it to be temporary. I closed my eyes. And did she? I asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. No, she said. She was very clear. In fact, she anticipated someone would try to undo it. I let out a slow breath. She asked me to document her reasoning, Margaret continued. I believe that documentation was never entered into the court record. I opened my eyes. What kind of documentation? I asked. A memorandum, she said. Not legal. Personal. But detailed. My heart started to beat faster. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Mark's attorney asked me to imply the opposite, she said. And I won't do that. Silence stretched between us. I have a copy, she said, if you want it. Yes, I said. I do. The memo arrived by courier 2 days later. 6 pages. Typed. Dated. Signed. Eleanor's words. Clear. Unapologetic. She wrote about favoritism. About how Mark had learned to perform competence without accountability. About how my parents confused peace with avoidance. And about me. Lauren does not ask to be chosen, she wrote. She assumes responsibility and waits to be noticed. I am noticing now. I sat at my desk and read it twice. Then I closed the folder. But they did. Dana reviewed the memo carefully. This changes nothing legally, she said. But it changes everything. Strategically. How? Because it destroys the last narrative they're holding on to, she replied. I didn't ask her to file it. I asked her to hold it. 2 days later, Mark's attorney contacted Dana. They wanted to reopen discussions. Dana, do you want to engage? I stared at the screen. No, I said. She nodded. Then we end this. She said, firm, polite, unambiguous. Ms. Whitfield will not participate in further discussions. Any future contact regarding this matter should cease. That should have been the end. But desperation makes people reckless. Mark sent me an email that night. Not angry, not pleading. You won. Please stop. Mom cries every day. Dad won't eat. I don't know how to fix this. I read it once. Then I closed my laptop. Because this was the part where families like mine tried one last trick. They turned accountability into cruelty. The next morning, I blocked his email. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't planned. I drove to the lake house and met with a local real estate attorney. Not to sell, to protect. We discussed easements, liability exposure, long-term planning. At the end of the meeting, she asked a simple question. What do you want this place to be? I thought about it. A boundary, I said. She smiled. That's unusual. I know, I replied, but it's honest. By the time fall arrived, the family pressure had faded into background noise. Not gone, just irrelevant. And that's when the call came from my father. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. I'm in the hospital, he said. Not dramatic, not urgent, just factual. And suddenly the question I'd avoided for months stood in front of me. Would I go? I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't hear him, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to notice what I felt before I responded. There was no panic, no rush of fear, no instinct to drop everything and run, just a quiet, heavy pause. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said finally. My voice was even. "Are you stable?" "Yes," my father replied. "They're running tests. It's not an emergency." I waited. Silence stretched on the line. He was waiting for something too. Reassurance, an offer, a promise. I didn't give it. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. There it was, the sharp inhale, the wounded pride, the expectation cracking. "I thought you should know," he said. "You're still my daughter." I closed my eyes. "I know," I replied. "But that's not an answer." Another pause. Longer this time. "Your mother wanted me to call," he admitted. She thinks this might be a chance for us to talk." A chance. Illness as leverage. Vulnerability as currency. "I'm not opposed to information," I said carefully. "But I'm not reopening conversations that already ended." His voice tightened. "So that's it? You won't even come see me?" I thought about the hospital room, the beeping machines, my mother's tearful performance, Mark hovering, waiting to see which version of me would show up. The old one would have gone, the one who apologized for breathing too loudly, the one who brought flowers to smooth over cruelty, the one who mistook endurance for love. That woman didn't exist anymore. "I'll send my well wishes through Dana," I said. "If you need anything practical, she can coordinate." "You'd let a lawyer speak for you?" he asked, disbelief creeping in. "I let professionals handle situations that require clarity," I replied. He scoffed. "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "I had to." The call ended without goodbye. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time afterward, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. This was the moment people warned you about. The moment where holding a boundary made you look heartless. The moment where choosing yourself felt indistinguishable from cruelty. But here was the truth I hadn't known before. Going would not have helped him. It would have helped them. It would have allowed them to rewrite the narrative again. To say, "See, she came back. She always does." That night, Dana emailed me. "Your father's attorney reached out. They're asking if you'd consider mediation." I stared at the screen. "No," I typed back, "but thank you for the heads up." The next few weeks passed quietly, too quietly. I finished a major project for a manufacturing client. I signed a lease on a small downtown office. I started mentoring a junior analyst who reminded me of myself before I learned how to say no. Life moved forward. And then, just before Thanksgiving, the letter arrived. It was handwritten. My mother's handwriting. Careful, slanted, familiar. I didn't open it right away. I carried it around the house for 2 days, setting it down, picking it back up. When I finally did, I read it standing at the counter. "Lauren, I don't know how we got here. I replay everything over and over. I know you think we failed you. Maybe we did. But we did what we thought was best. Families compromise. They forgive. They don't walk away. Your father is home now. He's weak. He asks about you. Mark is trying. I am asking you, as your mother, to come home for Christmas. We can start fresh." I folded the letter once. Then again. Start fresh. As if the past could be erased by proximity. As if control could be mistaken for love, just because it wore a softer voice. I called Dana. "They're inviting me for Christmas," I said. She didn't react. She never did. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I looked out the window. The trees were bare, the air sharp. "I want to feel peace on Christmas morning," I said. "Not tension." "Then you already know your answer," she replied. I did. I sent a single reply. Typed, brief, "I won't be coming. I wish you well." No justification, no defense. The response came within minutes. "So that's your final decision?" I didn't answer. Christmas came quietly. I woke up late, made coffee, took a walk by the lake, watched the water move without asking permission from anyone. No guilt followed me. That was when I knew something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't resisting them anymore. I was done orbiting them entirely. In early January, Dana called again. "There's one last thing," she said. "Mark filed a motion." I exhaled slowly. Of course he did. He's contesting the validity of the transfer again, she continued. But this time, he attached a statement from your father. My jaw tightened. About what? Claiming undue influence, she said. That Eleanor was pressured. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because they're grasping, Dana added, and it won't work. But there will be a hearing. When? I asked. 3 weeks, she said. You don't have to attend. I can represent you. I thought about Eleanor's memo, about her foresight. I'll attend, I said. Dana paused. Are you sure? Yes, I replied. I think it's time they see me. Not the daughter. Not the disappointment. Not the negotiable one. The woman who signed her own name and meant it. When the hearing date was set, I booked a flight. Not with dread. With calm. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending something cleanly. And I knew, as I packed my bag, that once this door closed, it would close for good. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted time to stand in the space without them. To let my body register that this was not a battlefield. It was a process, one I understood. Dana met me near the security checkpoint. She wore the same calm expression she always did, tablet tucked under her arm like an extension of her spine. They're already here, she said quietly. I nodded. I figured. We walked down the hallway together. My shoes sounded louder than I expected, each step echoing off the marble walls. With every footfall, I felt something steady beneath me. Not confidence, not anger, ground. They were seated when we entered the courtroom. My parents sat together in the second row. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. His shoulders sloped inward like they were folding in on themselves. My mother sat rigid beside him, hands clasped in her lap, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds, like she was afraid I might disappear again. Mark sat on the aisle. He didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, his expression flickered. Surprise. Then something like resentment. Then calculation. He nodded once, as if acknowledging a colleague rather than a sister. I didn't respond. Dana and I took our seats at the front. She leaned in slightly. Remember, she said softly, you don't owe them anything but honesty. I know, I replied. The judge entered. We stood. We sat. The hearing began with procedural language. Dates, filings, motions. I listened without reacting, my hands folded neatly in front of me. Then Mock's attorney stood. He was younger than I expected. Polished. Confident in the way people are when they think precedent will do the work for them. Your Honor, he began. We are here because a vulnerable elderly woman was unduly influenced in the final months of her life, resulting in a transfer of significant property that contradicts years of expressed intent. I watched my father's jaw tighten. The attorney continued. We will show that Ms. Whitfield was isolated, confused, and pressured by the respondent. I didn't flinch. Dana rose smoothly. Your Honor, she said, this motion is not only unsupported, it contradicts documented evidence previously submitted and ignored by the petitioner. She gestured toward the bench, including contemporaneous records, third-party testimony, and the decedent's own written statements. The judge nodded. We'll hear testimony. Mark's attorney called my father first. He stood slowly, gripping the edge of the bench for balance. I didn't look away. Mr. Whitfield, the attorney said gently, can you tell the court about your mother's condition in the months before her passing? My father cleared his throat. She was forgetful, confused at times. Did she ever express uncertainty about her decisions? The attorney asked. Yes, my father said. She relied on others, especially Lauren. There it was. Dana stood for cross-examination. Mr. Whitfield, she said evenly, how often did you visit your mother during that period? My father hesitated. I had work obligations. Please answer the question, Dana said. Once a month, he admitted. And Ms. Whitfield? Dana asked. Lauren? He said. She visited weekly. Dana nodded. So when you say your mother relied on others, you're referring to the daughter who showed up consistently? Yes, my father said, defensive now. But that doesn't mean... Dana held up a hand. No further questions. My mother was called next. She spoke about concern, about confusion, about feeling excluded. Dana listened patiently. Then she asked one question. Mrs. Whitfield, Were you present when Eleanor signed the transfer documents? No, my mother said. Were you present for any of the meetings with her attorney? No. Then your testimony is based on feeling, not fact, Dana said calmly. Thank you. Mark took the stand last. This was the first time he looked directly at me. Mark, his attorney said, did your grandmother ever indicate that you would inherit the lake property? Yes, Mark said quickly. For years. Everyone knew that. Dana rose. Mark, she said, do you recall attempting to access the property after the transfer? Yes. And were you informed in writing that you no longer had legal access? Yes. And did you respect that? Mark's jaw clenched. I believed it was temporary. Dana nodded. Did you believe that because someone told you that? Or because you wanted it to be true? The courtroom went still. Mark looked at the judge, then at his attorney. I believed it because it made sense, he said finally. Dana smiled faintly. No further questions. Then the judge looked at me. Miss Whitfield, he said, you may testify if you choose. I stood. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I walked to the witness stand and raised my hand. I understand this hearing has focused on influence, I said when invited to speak. So I want to be clear. I looked at the judge, then at my family. I didn't influence my grandmother. I listened to her. My voice didn't shake. She asked me to help because no one else would sit still long enough to hear what she was afraid of. I paused. She wasn't confused. She was decisive. And she was tired of being ignored. I turned slightly, not to accuse, but to acknowledge. She knew her choice would upset people. She made it anyway. I faced the judge again. I honored her decision because she trusted me to. That's all. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, he said. The hearing concluded faster than I expected. The judge announced he would issue a ruling within days. As we stood to leave, my mother reached for me. Lauren, she whispered. Please. I stepped back gently. Not here, I said. Mark didn't speak. He just watched me walk away. 2 days later, Dana called. The ruling came in, she said. I closed my eyes. And? I asked. The motion was denied, she replied. In full. I exhaled. They cited lack of evidence and misuse of the court, she added. And they warned against further filings. I smiled for the first time in days. Is that it? I asked. There was a pause. Yes, Dana said. Legally. I hung up and sat quietly. It was over. But I knew one thing. They wouldn't let it end without trying one last thing. And I was ready. They tried one last thing. Not legally. Not publicly. Personally. The voicemail came 3 days after the ruling. It was my mother. Her voice was calm, careful, almost gentle. The tone she used when she wanted something, but didn't want to sound like she was asking. Lauren, she said, your father isn't doing well. He's very quiet these days. The house feels empty. I know the court decided what it decided, but families don't live by court rulings. We live by forgiveness. I listened to the entire message without interruption. Then I deleted it, because this was the final test, not of strength, of clarity. For most of my life, forgiveness had been a lever they pulled when accountability got uncomfortable. It was never about repair. It was about returning to the old order, the one where my silence kept things smooth, the one where my needs were negotiable. That version of forgiveness always came with conditions. Come home. Stop being difficult. Let things go. But nothing was ever asked of them. That afternoon, I sat in my office alone. The windows were open. The city hummed quietly below. I looked around at the space I had built from nothing. The clients I chose, the work that mattered, the peace that didn't require permission. And I understood something clearly for the first time. I didn't need closure from them. I already had it. So I did what I hadn't done before. I wrote a letter. Not long, not emotional, not angry, just precise. I thanked them for raising me. I acknowledged the past without debating it. I stated my boundaries plainly. I wrote that I would not be visiting. I would not be discussing the estate again. I would not be participating in family gatherings, holidays, or reconciliations framed around guilt. I wished them well. And I told them, clearly, that any further attempts to contact me would go through my attorney. Then I mailed it. Certified. Receipt requested. When the return card came back signed, something inside me finally went quiet. The following weeks were uneventful. No calls, no emails, no intermediaries. I heard through a distant relative that Mark had moved out of state, that my parents were selling the house, that they told people I had changed. They were right. I had. Spring came early that year. I spent weekends at the lake house, not fixing it up to impress anyone, but making it livable in a way that felt honest. I planted things slowly. I learned which rooms held warmth in the morning and which ones stayed cool at night. Sometimes I sat on the porch with coffee and did nothing at all. No rehearsed conversations, no defensive explanations, no waiting for the next conflict. Just stillness. One afternoon, Dana visited. She had never seen the place before. She walked through quietly, taking it in. "This suits you," she said finally. "It does," I replied. She looked at me. "Do you ever regret it?" I thought about the question, about the birthdays forgotten, the promotions dismissed, the inheritance treated like a mistake. "No," I said. "I regret how long I stayed." She nodded. Before she left, she asked one more thing. "Would you do anything differently?" I smiled. I would have trusted the discomfort sooner. That night, I slept with the windows open. The sound of the water carried through the dark. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't vindicated. I was free. And here's what I learned. For anyone listening who recognizes themselves in this story, family drama doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with small permissions you never agreed to give. Favoritism doesn't feel like cruelty at first. It feels like being asked to understand. Manipulation rarely shouts. It whispers, "We just want what's best for you," until what's best for you conflicts with what's convenient for them. Revenge doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to go back. Karma isn't loud either. It's slow. It's procedural. It's inevitable. The tables didn't turn because I shouted. They turned because I stopped kneeling. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been excluded, overlooked, or quietly erased by the people who were supposed to protect you, you're not alone. You're not difficult. You're not ungrateful. You're not wrong for choosing yourself. And if you're ready to hear more stories like this, stories about boundaries, payback, and dignity reclaimed, then like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply walking away with everything that was always yours.